Blog Talk Radio.
Okay, we've lost 10 minutes of this show trying to get this technology to work for us. Michael Linton, are you there?
At least I think I am, yes.
And Eric Harris-Braun, are you there?
I certainly am.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to do it backwards now. I'm going to do the intro, which is, good morning, world. Welcome to Open Money on Blog Talk Radio. Coming to you from the northwest coast of Turtle Island and the southeast coast of Turtle Island.
Northeast,
right, Eric?
He's not even on the coast. He doesn't qualify. He's a
No, I'm probably 3 hours from the coast in New York State.
But you are on the other side of Turtle Island.
Yes, wait.
Isn't that? I mean, this is marvelous technology.
And it's so meaningful. So meaningful.
Yeah.
So let's get to the subject.
Right. Okay, but before we do, introduce yourself. Michael, you're a designer, developer of LET systems and open money systems. And Eric, how would you introduce yourself?
Oh, there's so many ways to introduce oneself. I'm not quite sure what the best way to do it is. I think for the purposes of this talk, I'm the software geek, and basically someone who cares deeply about getting the world to be using metacurrencies.
Okay, well that's a good beginning. I'm Ernie Yacub, and I work with Michael and Eric on community currency development and open money development. So we thought we would start with a brief introduction on the fundamentals of community currencies. So Michael, can you tell us in as few sentences as possible what community currencies are, the state of the art, as it were?
Oh, that's nice. In as few sentences as possible. Oh, damn, I've used one already. Well, the essence of a money is that it's a form of promise that people swap to acquire real goods and services. And hitherto we have believed that the real money was something that was substantiated by precious metals or materials in reserve, a note of trade of some sort, or simply by the fiat declaration of a centralized government. The money was the important thing. It was stuff. Now what we found out with our community explorations and our thinking about this is that if I say I'll do something for Eric, and Eric is willing to do something for Ernie, and I'll do something for Ernie, then money has moved around the loop. Our promises and the participation has made a money out of our word. Now this can only happen, however, inside a community that accepts that premise and makes some degree of agreement. Might be formal, might be quite informal, but basically a community currency, the negotiation of value exchange through our declaration, our promises. That form of money only works within those people who say, yep, I believe you, I believe this, I believe our world. And as such, the ability to create and negotiate currencies on the fly this way is restricted to people in groups, people in organizations who are willing to work together. We can't create by that act a money that will work everywhere in the world for everybody. By these acts, we can only create monies that work inside the nets, the groups, the communities that say yes.
And so, in the beginning, without the internet, this was essentially they started as local currencies.
Yes, I think it was predominant at the beginning that degree of sort of face-to-face awareness and I will if you will was much easier, still is much easier to create in your neighbors, in the town where you live, right here in River City. Where we are is where the relationships exist and the conversations exist that allow people to quite easily understand this. When you start looking at distant connections, non-regional, international, there's a different level of who's on first, who do we trust? And historically that's been very difficult. In my experience, the only forms of such community currency that have had any significant development and exposure and effectiveness have been the commercial barter networks. And their effectiveness has had a hell of a lot to do with the administrative brokerage, the costing, and the payments necessary to keep these brokers and community development people active. They've been fairly successful.
And these barter systems are pretty much just involve businesses. It doesn't involve people in the community, in the communities where those businesses are, particularly. I wanted to
generally not. That's true. But in terms of that concept of that something can be non-local, the first evidence for that we can properly cite is some of the aspects of commercial barter exchanges. For our own work, it's all been local. I don't think anybody has yet created what I'd call a social currency that operates anywhere except in the place.
Well, that's interesting, and people have been at it, in our experience for the last quarter century. Eric, you're in the neighborhood. You're in the Ithaca neighborhood, are you not? Ithaca Hours?
Within striking distance. It's across the state, but yeah.
Yeah, and certainly you've heard. Have you ever seen the Ithaca Hour?
I've seen some of the bills, and I've been in Ithaca a couple times and seen stores that take Ithaca Hours, but I've never spent them.
Right. So there's an example of a local currency that was started, 10, 15 years ago, and there have been numerous attempts throughout the United States particularly to start similar hour systems without much success.
Well, with some success, which sometimes the success has been the problem. In fact, I think one of the lines I've often made is the good news is this is working, the bad news is this is working. Because what appears to work is often satisfactory for people, satisficing to their rather limited perceptions of what they can do with it. And that's more in the way than the way forward, I feel, quite often. But let me make a point here. The point is that it is now nearly 11:17 on my clock, and we only have another 13 minutes of Eric's participation. So, Eric, I'd really like you to take the lion's share of the next 10 minutes or so. And tell me all about your sense of the meta-currency concept here. I mean, that's an interesting word. I've heard you use it before, but I've never quite recognized this is a new definition. It's not complementary. It's not alternative. It's meta. Tell us about the meta.
Yeah. The way I've been seeing this and what I mean, there's so many different ways to visualize this pattern, but it's a pattern that happens again and again all over the place, it seems to me. And it needs to happen with money. So that's an abstract thing to say, but what money does is it allows us to treat value abstractly, right? Money is a stand-in for the things that we need. Mm-hmm. What we haven't done is we haven't taken that process of abstraction, and applied it to money itself. Mm-hmm. So where money makes value liquid, makes it something that different kinds of value can be exchanged for each other, that fact, the liquidification of value, increases the capacity to generate wealth among the people who use that. That's one step in a long process of people being able to do incredible things when they join together in community. When we take the next step and we let our currencies themselves, our monies themselves, become abstractified and create them ourselves, and create lots of different kinds of them to apply to lots of different situations, well, then we will be taking the next step in liberating economic potential. Now, that's the way I've phrased it here is very abstract, and that's because the whole thing is about abstraction. And that's just the same way where if you were talking thousands of years ago with people who were trying to understand this idea that you could use a piece of metal or a stone or a shell to represent something that's valuable, they would be like, that's nuts. And so what I'm doing...
Slight point here is they always bought the metal, but the stones were an abstractification. They definitely were. A precious metal people saw as value. But sure, when they started cowrie shells or big stone pieces in the Polynesians, they were definitely into the abstractification. I agree. Sorry.
Yeah, but it still is an abstraction, and the abstraction of metal is one that's it's borne up by the face that's on it in many ways, because you don't, well, okay, we don't need to get into the argument there of exactly how that goes, but I think there is really a step of jumping from saying, okay, I'll use this corn or this wheat to trade with because somebody else will like it even if I don't want it. And there is an abstractification because you can't actually do anything with the metal other than use it for its trade value.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, back to the meta currency. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, drop it. That's where we were talking. Value in trade, value in the item, the abstractification.
So the thing about meta currencies is that, I mean, a meta currency, really, it's not really a meta currency. It's a meta currency system that is what I think the ball of wax is, the game that's being played that needs to be played, which is to create a place, a space, a set of tools that enable the creation of new forms of currencies that can apply in all kinds of new ways.
And that is the software that you and Jeff Cheshire and Michael are designing and developing, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's a few others who've thought a little bit about this. Arthur Brock is a person who thinks about a currency platform and currency tools, but so far it seems like the Open Money Project is the only one that's shooting to create something that'll be globally deployable.
Hugh Bernard would be another identifiable on that.
That's right.
But
really, it comes down to the three of you are working together, with based on various specifications, and are writing the code.
We're doing our best.
Yeah, good, excellent. When can we have it?
The perennial question.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting. I've spoken occasionally about the Irishman on a desert island who finds the genie in the bottle. The genie gets bored waiting for the Irishman to think what to do. And he suggests, take this bottle, see it pours milk, it pours beer, it pours water, it pours whiskey, it pours brake fluid. The bottle will pour any liquid you like. And the Irishman said, great, I'll have 2 more of those. And there's a sense of the redundancy of that situation that is often part of our problem with getting people into the meta level of community currencies. They don't really see that one open platform provides every possible variety if it is sufficiently meta-capable. And this is the beauty of the work that Eric and Jeff are doing at the moment, is that we're entering a space where the currency definition is another matter of creation that is embedded in the facility of the system, the network.
You guys talk about the ontology of the system. Can you explain that to a duffer like me?
That's an interesting question. It goes to so actually the question: can I explain it to a duffer like you, or can I explain the ontology? There's two separate questions.
Well, start with explaining the ontology, and I'll tell you whether you've explained it to a duffer like me.
Yeah, I think most likely that is not within my skill sets, not because you're a duffer, but because of my ability to explain things, which is where a different kind of duffing lies. The trick about this is to create a system that can hold the meta-concepts and is about the meta-concepts, not about the concepts themselves. So, in other words, when you're creating a system that can create currencies, what you have to think about is what are the things that will exist in that system and represent those things. So in the case of where we're at so far with the design of the system, what we have is a representation of the entities in the system and the relationships between those entities. Okay, so what are the entities in a metacurrency system? Well, there are the accounts that might hold transactions in a currency. There are the different currencies. And then there's a third thing which is a little bit tricky to explain, but what I'll call it is, what we call it are the contexts. Or another way of looking at that is it's the surface area in which all of these other entities populate. So in other words, you can think of them as, well, they're very, very analogous to domain names on the internet. So your email address lives within a context. If you have a Gmail email address, it might be ernie@gmail.com. If I have an address at my alma mater, it might be eric@almamater.edu. And each one of those places is a context in which my name is known. Similarly, that is another piece in our system, which is what are the names under which the other entities, the currencies and the accounts, can be known. So we've got three entities so far in our ontology being the description of what the whole space looks like, the currencies, the accounts, the contexts, and we're missing the last piece, which is the actual transaction themselves. We call those transactions the flows. So a flow is an event in a currency, you might think of that as, or you could say a transfer of value from one place to another, but the whole concept of currencies is actually much larger than that, so that's why we use the term flow. Okay, so our ontology consists so far of four entities: the accounts, the currencies, the contexts, and the flows. And then the second dimension of the ontologies is how these entities are related with each other. And we call the relationships the links between the different entities. So our ontology is one of a very simple pattern of entities and links, things that exist and how they're related with each other. So if you have an account, like I have an account, Eric, well, there's going to be a link between that account and a context that says that my account is in that context. That shows how it's related. If I have a currency, it may also be in a context, so that means there's a link between those two entities. Now we get to the fun part. The fun part is when you create a flow between two accounts, what you're doing is you're creating a new entity in the system, the new flow, and you're adding links between existing entities, the two accounts and the currency. And the links are going to be ones that say something like, this account is the declarer of this flow, the person who said, I'm making this flow be. This account over here is the account that is receiving the flow or accepting it. So there's another link between the account, between the receiving account and the flow that's newly created. And then thirdly, you might have the currency saying, I approve this flow. This flow, as described and recorded in the system, follows the rules that this currency is specifies. And such a rule might be an account may only transfer if it has a certain credit limit, right? So the currency would approve that by adding in a link that specifies that relationship. So Ernie, does that make any sense whatsoever? An ontology of entities and links in which you have entities related with the links, related to each other through the links?
Yes, I do vaguely understand. I have a sense of what's happening, but then I've also heard this before. So it'd be very interesting to get Colin to listen to this and see if he can make any sense of it.
Well, can I put in a comment here? Can I make a comment that may add?
Yeah, hold on to the comment for a moment, because I just want to point people to the fact that this is open money on Blog Talk Radio. There is a chat line where people can find the websites to explore this material a little deeper, and I just wanted to ask Eric if he has if he has a description of this ontology on openmoney.info.
Yes, there is if you go to openmoney.info and you click over to the practice page, there is a link to the entities and links, and there's another piece that's called the mesh and churn, which are some diagrams that show what this looks like. It's rather technical, but it does actually give you a visualization of the entities and how they're linked together by the links of different types that declare the relationships between them.
Can I make the point here that part of the value of this is the reason why it had to be done. These entities and links don't have to be in the same server, the same computer, the same country. The whole point of this ontology and its openness and cross-platform flexibility is that we are breaking out of the one machine for one currency concept. We're looking at a fully distributed sort of cloud of information. Eric calls it the mesh. That there's a mesh of references to the events, the context, the counts, the currencies, the flows, that is now distributed beyond any server. And that's both the reason for this ontology and the consequence of it.
Yeah, I'd say that's right. I mean, that's another good analogy of looking at it. The Internet itself is what I've just described. It has the same ontological structure. Thousands of machines with different web pages. And you can think of the links as the URLs that point from one to another. In the case of the open money ontology, the links have a little bit of extra data associated with it. It's a pointer from one entity to another of a certain type that describes what that link is.
And it's this that has taken us to actually marrying the capacity of the Internet to the capacity of open money. I made a point in a recent presentation that most monetary institutions are still, if you look at the origin of the wheel was much preceded by the log. There were logs as rollers for many millennia probably before somebody worked out what a wheel was. And as far as the Internet's, in fact the financial industry's approach to the information age has been appalling. They're still moving hardware around. They still think money is a lump of gold of some sort in some conceptual way. And we indeed, when we started using community currencies, we were forced by the limits of our technology to act as though we were thinking the same way. Now with this breakthrough, we are acting the way that the facility of the Internet and the concept of open money naturally allow. Fully distributed, fully interactive, no barriers.
Great. So when can we have that, guys?
Let me see. It's 11:34. Well, one of the things you might want to comment very briefly on, Eric, because I know you're over your time already, widgets and Ning. Ning me a widget.
Ning
me a widget. Well, come on, you guys. This is Geek Talk. What are you talking about?
What we're talking about here is one of the key aspects of one of the things that the Internet provides for us, and Web 2.0 especially, as it's been called, is the ability to embed a little chunk of somebody else's website in your website. And this is a wonderful facility. It makes it much easier for there to, it makes it really quite possible to do some fascinating things. For example, and I'll do this as an example, and then you'll see how open money plays into it. There is a website out there called EditGrid, which basically implements the same functionality as your Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. And they give you a little bit of HTML that you don't have to be able to understand at all, but you go paste it into your web page, into your blog, into your MySpace, into your Facebook, and there will show up the little spreadsheet that you created on Edit Me, and it'll look exactly as if it were living on your blog or your other web page. That kind of embedding
Facebook
is
account?
a fabulous tool.
Facebook?
What's that?
Your Facebook?
Your Facebook account. Facebook and is another one of these social networking websites. It's very much like MySpace, which many people have heard of. It's very much like Blogspot, but has a host more of features involved in it. The point being that very quickly, as we get this stuff rolling, we'll be able to have little widgets that people can embed in their own websites to do things like do a transaction in my currency that I've created. And so therefore, that might be a reputation currency, or it may be a currency that's tracking CO2 that a community is expelling, or maybe some other kind of currency, and they can, without having to do anything complicated, come to our servers or any host of an open money server that is hosting that particular currency and embed a little widget that displays or allows transaction in that currency in their website.
So it's a bit like a PayPal button.
Exactly. Only more integrated, in fact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well,
that's very good news. And on the thought that you've probably got to leave us, do you have any last comments, Eric?
Oh, well, it's always nice to talk about open money, but it's even more fun to code it, so I'm going to leave you, even though that's actually not where I'm going to next, but it's a good excuse. Thank you very much for having me here.
Yeah.
Pleasure, Eric.
That's crazy, Eric. More fun to code it. That's amazing. So we'll have to talk about. You'll have to come back here, and we'll have to talk about elevator pitches sometime.
Yes, we'll have an hour of elevator pitches. We'll have a brainstorming elevator pitch day where you're not allowed to say anything that isn't an elevator pitch.
Okay, that'll be fun.
Okay.
All right, take it easy, guys.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Bye-bye.
So that was Eric Harris-Braun in Upper New York State, one of the key people in the open money development group, developing open money, free money for anybody in the world.
A noble task, and proceeding quite rapidly. Of course, if there's anybody out there listening to this and thinking, how can I help make this move forward, give us a call.
Send us money.
You know. And resources. You see, one of the things that Eric and Jeff and I have to be really conscious of is that if we do put up a widget on Ning or Facebook
what's going to happen
in particular,
is that whatever server is going to get swamped.
There's the capacity for a huge surge of interest and activation. Now, the value of the software package that is the core, not the little widget that takes you to the Open Money server, but the Open Money server itself, is that Open Money isn't meant to be one server. It's meant to be thousands and millions, ultimately, of servers. Just like email is supported by millions of PopMail servers. It's not one big email machine somewhere buried under a mountain in New York State or something. It's every ISP, and many individual users run mail server software, and the load of the entire mail system is distributed across millions and millions of these servers. Similarly, with open money, the software is not standalone. It's automatically part of the network. When you open up the software on your machine, I open it on mine, somebody else on theirs, we are opened to the open money network, and the traffic will not all end up in one place, making for a huge hotspot. Now, of course,
in a way, it's almost like a parallel net, a money net.
It's curious. I think it's it's probably the most explicit application of the internet as a distributive system. The peer-to-peer file exchanges is a very good example. But it's sort of like we're using the internet to flip files around and experience our ability to swap information, images, videos, whatever. That's great. But the images and videos are items that we're now using the internet to shift. When we're talking about open money is an expression of internet. I mean, it's not just internet, it's a social context, the whole open money, but the way in which it is going to happen on internet is one of the least distanced from the core of what internet is. Internet is a simple network that connects, and it's dumb in the center and smart at the edges. It just shifts packets. It uses a TCP IP protocol to shift packets of information around a routing system. That's what it does. Open money, the CC network, is very, very much the same thing for monetary or evaluative or measure or account statements that people make to each other using this medium. And it is so close in its topology, in its form, to the internet itself, is that I feel we're looking at the marriage of the information age with money on the internet. And
well, that's pretty exciting. How about if we explore for the next 10, 15 minutes what people are going to use this for? I mean, how are people going to use this new facility to create a better world and try and deal with the really, really serious issues that are coming at us? Climate change, end of cheap oil, possible nuclear war with Iran, probable the way those guys are talking. Well,
I've got to leave Iran out of it for the point, in the sense that is, although it's driven by monetary and geopolitical realpolitik, where's the oil, where's the anxiety of the corporate state vested in particularly the North American model. Yeah, they're general problems. And what we can say about open money is that which cannot be done because there is no money for it is the first transition, the first expression that we'll likely see to be really powerful. That's like
really like dealing with homelessness in our community.
Oh, you're 2 stages down the track there, though. The first one is the ability to form an association informally, easily, quickly, to achieve something. It could be a homelessness project, but it's more likely to be, it would be more likely an expansion of the free cycle model. Free cycle is a wonderful idea, but it only applies, of course, to things you can utterly give away and you have no expectation of gaining any value from them. Well, what we'll now see is a lot of free cycling expanded into a sort of give and get model. You can still free cycle. Nothing's going to impose or impede that process. But there will be more goods and services made available if people can see that when I make my goods and services available, goods and services become available to me. That is when there is a sort of a closed loop of the pay it forward turned into pay it round. We don't just give away our services and gifts, although we can. We also can be acknowledged for them and therefore be in a position to gain benefit in return. Now, that'll be very informal and loose, and it might be joint ventures. 5 of us are putting together a book, or writing a piece of software, or floating a company, or launching a homelessness charity or something that requires a degree of accounting, openness, collaboration. We will use open money to measure, because ultimately what you measure is what you think matters. If you don't measure something, it's very difficult to form any analysis of what you've achieved. Did we get there yet? Are we there yet? You don't know until you know how far you're trying to go, how many miles, how long, how much money and time has gone into this project, who's doing it. Did you do all the work, or did he do all the work? What's this worth? What's that worth? Those are the issues that an open money facility will allow us to use to make actions happen that would not otherwise be happening. So that's the primary thing. Is you just got to look at it as, we can suddenly talk to each other and talk money.
Sure, but my interest, as you know, is in community development and dealing with issues, social justice issues, poverty, peace and war, and those kinds of things. Food and housing in the community, and the difficulty that we have in dealing with these issues is that normal money, conventional Canadian dollars, aren't available for those kinds of things.
Yes, but there the addressing things like social justice, poverty, food security, and so on and so forth doesn't need open money. It just needs collaborative currencies, collaborative networks. They could be singular. Now, they would be less effective, much less effective, because a singular currency is a very thin and risky and unstable thing. The value of the open money model is that it suddenly makes it possible to have thousands and hundreds and millions of these things, all operating through the same platform, so that instead of, here's a TV, you can have one program, it plays for 2 hours on Wednesday afternoons. People would not buy a TV for that. People buy TVs because they can find dozens of channels and hundreds of programs. People buy computers. Possibly not. But those are the to's and fro's. The ability to have many options is like having a box of colored pencils. It's more entertaining than a bunch of black. Just a minute. Excuse me a second.
You got dead air. That's okay. Michael is dealing with something at the moment, so I've got to fill in here somehow. And we're coming close to the end of this program anyway. If people want to, look, Shannon has left the room. I didn't notice. Shannon joined the room at 11:44, and she's left the room at 11:45. Shannon was not very interested in this program at all.
That's probably because I was talking to my neighbor. Yes, okay.
Anyway, I was just giving people a quick review here in terms of where we're at. We're about 10 minutes away from the end of the hour, and this is Open Money on Blog Talk Radio. People can, if they have any interest in this topic, can follow up by having a look at the various different websites that are available, and that's on the chat line that goes with Blog Talk Radio web chat, and that's up on, and if you got here, you're on the Open Money page anyway, so you should be able to find it.
However, the chat may not be up when you're listening to this podcast, so openmoney.info would be the first place to go. openmoney.editme.com would be the second. openmoney.org would be the third. And lets.net covers the whole bag.
Yeah, that's why
and these will be on our
Let's.net first, because that's the simplest, easiest to remember, Let's.net, and it's basically an index of all these other sites.
It leads to them all. All roads lead to Rome, and all roads come from Let's.net. That's a good thought. So I'd like to just return to that point, because sometimes we have to make points 3 or 4 times before we even understand what we are saying. Never mind, other people can hear it. The value of open money is that it has opened the variety, the flexibility, the range. Would you like a bicycle if it only ran in tram lines? Not so much use. For a start, if it's in tram lines, you've got to be nose to tail with the guy in front and people behind you. Whereas with bicycle on open space, you can go in all directions and get around each other. If you were told, well, anything in its singular form has limitations that are dramatically released as soon as you get to the multiple. And community currencies for 20 years, or for, in fact, 100 years, have been limited by the localization and the perception that we all have to club together to make one thing work in our town. And that, in fact, if you have 2 things, they're in some way in opposition to each other, or they're diminishing the effectiveness, diluting things. None of this is true. It's just the perception. And the perception was heavily reinforced by the facilities we had for supporting community money. Well, now the facility we're introducing supports absolutely everything, which means you can be as singular as you like if you're determined to have your own little tight, closed, our way or no way currency. By all means, the system will support it. But many of the people who are participating in that may also believe that they should be doing other things too, want to do other things. Neighborhood networks, joint ventures, who knows what their games are. And open money will allow both the closure to narrow or object-oriented projects, that is, here we are trying to save the church, or we're trying to do an environmental cleanup, or we're trying to sort out homelessness issues, or deal with education in our community. And, well, many is better than one. That's our answer to the situation at this point.
Well, I'm just having a quick chat on the web chat here with someone called Soft Dev. So I'm the kind of person that can't walk and chew gum at the same time. But we got about 7 minutes left. What?
I'm on the chat too. Nice to see Soft Dev.
Nice
you're listening. Yeah, I don't know. He must be listening. I'm not calling in, but he's listening. Anyway, be in touch, sir.
No,
madam.
Soft Dev says just checking out the site. I don't know. So, but
the site.
Okay. See you later.
Take care. Thanks, Soft Dev.
Yeah.
Catch you sometime.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
I think we've reached a good turning point for today's show.
Mm-hmm. We should talk about tomorrow's show. We should also talk about the fact that there's 10 minutes missing from the beginning of this show, which probably makes it virtually useless, although there was some really good material.
Why would it make it useless? The 10 minutes is just missing from the real-time process. No podcaster will notice the 10 minutes missing.
I guess it would just, the podcast wouldn't start at the. That's right. Of course, it's when we actually go live that the podcast starts. So that's.
We have our fingers on the pulse of this technology.
Do we ever? But we're getting better at it.
Well, I'm going to let Ernie do this. Oh, tomorrow, yes, the fundamentals of money.
We're going to talk about the fundamentals of LETS systems and community currencies and open money. And
the least necessary and sufficient issues. What do you need and what don't you? What's at the core of virtual money, and what are the extensions, the extrapolations, the wrappings, the fashions? They're all interesting, but tomorrow we're dealing with the fundamentals. What do you need to know? All that is absolutely necessary and no frills attached. So it's
we're hoping that some of the people who are involved in community currency development around the world, who are connected on an e-group called IJCCR, which is at Yahoo. It's International Journal of Community Currencies Research, and we're hoping that there may be people there that might tune in and join the show tomorrow.
Yes, we are looking for the great lurking community. Most of these email groups are heavily repressed by the noise levels of the tub thumpers, the agenda bashers, the rhetorical idiots, and it degenerates the quality of conversation. Well, in our case, it's usury nuts, it's reform the banks, it's the people who think that if the Federal Reserve was different, the world would be different somehow.
We're not going to be talking about banks, Federal Reserve, interest, usury, what's wrong with the system and how it can be fixed if we have a revolution and take over the government. We're not going to talk about that kind of stuff. There's no point to talking about that stuff, and that's not our business anyway. We're in the open money business.
Yep. And it's such fun.
It is. It's very exciting, I'd say, because we're really close. We're very, very close. So, we've been talking about the ontologies of open money systems. That's Eric Harris-Braun was with us earlier describing the system that he and Jeff Cheshire are working on particularly. And Michael, you've been working with them. Anything you want to say about that before we sign off?
No, I think keep watching this space. Stay tuned. The world is coming. This is imminent, and you'll know when it's there because it'll be there. And it could be merely a matter of weeks before the next.
And it'll probably be everywhere. We'll be seeing open money widgets. Sounds like on a lot of websites. Well, in fact, BlogTalkRadio will eventually have an open money widget. Well,
we can put one on our own page for sure. I mean, there's no limit to what can be done. It will take a time for the process to propagate out, but we will have the capacity to offer it to anybody very soon.
And if anybody out there does want to join in and help, support, participate, this is an open process.
So get in touch. Be in touch with us. We will proceed. Well, I think we should close this program and sign off now so that it's got a nice tidy ending rather than it just disappears into the verbs. So I'm going to say thank you very much, Ernie, for hosting this show. I'm just about to log out. And
okay, Michael.
I take it you'd better make your closing statement nice and quick.
I will. I don't know what it is yet, but I will make a closing statement.
Like,
bye, Michael.
Good night. Bye.
No, it's afternoon.
Up?
It's not even afternoon yet.
All right.
Okay, see ya.
Bye.
So that was my